Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Gothi of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I would like to welcome you to The Raven's Call. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of this episode, like always. I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just a guy who likes to talk and has a YouTube channel, same as pretty much everybody else on here. Now, I do have decades of experience in heathenry, lots of study, lots of experience, lots of practical application. I do head a tribe and have some success there. I have wonderful people around me, and they are the key to the success of my tribe. My tribe is the success. I simply try and do the best for them that I can, given what I have to work with. But we have good, strong luck, and I have good, strong people around me. So take that as my curriculum vitae, if you will. And but the big thing is, these videos are just conversation starters. They're meant to be thought-provoking and things like that. It's not an end-all be-all on anything. I am no Asa Pope. I'm just a guy who likes to talk. So, on to, some housekeeping stuff first. You guys know all my contact information is down below. There's the Facebook group. You guys are welcome to jump in and have conversations there, engage each other, ask questions. Viewer requests are encouraged because I have some of my best episodes based on viewer requests. Those are always the ones that get the most views and the most positive responses from you guys. So please keep them coming. I love those things. They're fantastic. Had one come in to me just the other day, request to venture back into my whole soul complex correlation to mental health issues. I do intend to come back to that. That does require some putting things into perspective and order, some more work. And right now, with my schedule the way it is, I'm not able to give that the attention that it is due. And I'm afraid that I would come out with a subpar video on it, and that's something that I feel like needs some more real attention. So I hear you. I'm coming with it. Give me some time. I'll get some stuff pulled together, but I wanna do that right. So, yeah. And on the subject of scheduling, I want to appreciate all of you, express my appreciation that you guys are so understanding and rocking along with the fact that my schedule is just wonky. Working 2 jobs currently has left my schedule just brutal and ridiculous, and trying to put out a video every week has not been conducive. I just haven't been able to pull it off. It's sometimes it's a matter of I just haven't had time to do the prep work. Sometimes it's a matter of I get up and I find that it's Tuesday and I'm ready for a video to go out on Wednesday, and I'm just so fried from work that I don't have the brain power, I don't have the energy, I don't have the time to throw something together, and if I did, it would be lackluster, subpar, and I don't want to do that. That's not the essence of this channel. But understanding that this channel is never meant to be a huge mega production kind of thing. I mean, it's not something that I'm going to sit here and do hours and hours and hours of prep work on before an episode. It's conversational. It's meant to be that way. So it's a balancing act. So right now I've kind of landed in an every other week kind of schedule for the time being. I will probably continue to rock that for a while unless I get a moment and some inspiration and can put some stuff out more frequently. It just depends. The big thing here is that I'm just kind of working with what I can and the limitations of my schedule and my physical body. You guys have been amazingly supportive, and I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to give a shout out on the channel to say thank you all. It means the world to me. So that being said, let's rock on into today's subject. Now, today's subject, I wanted to, this is one that's been on my list for a while that I wanted to come back to. And honestly, I needed to go back and filter through the 180 some odd episodes that I've done and make sure that I haven't done a dedicated episode to this particular subject before. But I wanted to talk about family heirlooms. Not like I'm trying to bury the lead there. It's in the splash card, so you guys know what the episode is about. But the essence of family heirlooms from a heathen perspective and what they mean. And it seems like something that's a no-brainer, and to a certain extent it is, but you can probably hear the dog in the background. Sorry about that. She has separation anxiety, and my dad's outside on the tractor right now, so she's like, "Where's my daddy?" And but anyway, the idea behind family heirlooms takes on a different weight when you go from a heathen perspective, when you go delving into that world from a heathen worldview. And it's all born from a similar point. It all comes from a similar basis. But I feel like to heathens, family heirlooms mean something even more because there's a depth and complexity to the context behind it that other religions or other cultures may not necessarily have. They have the base pragmatic sentimental attachment to a family heirloom, but for a heathen, there's some extra meta stuff going on there that we recognize. It exists no matter what. Here's the thing about my view on heathenry. The way I view the world, and it's literally the worldview, this is how I see the world working. And whether other cultures or religions realize it or not, it's still the way the world works. It doesn't matter to me whether or not they recognize it. It doesn't require them to recognize it for it to work that way. It's simply an observation. It's kind of like the way luck works. It doesn't matter if the guy next to me understands luck or understands Gefrain or understands weird. It still works the way that it works. It doesn't change based on whether or not this individual recognizes and understands it. So, So, with family heirlooms, it doesn't matter whether or not somebody else understands it. It's still the way that it works, at least as far as I see it and the way that, my worldview operates. So, what is a family heirloom? A family heirloom is a thing that is passed down amongst the family members and bridges generations. It's not necessarily, a thing doesn't necessarily reach heirloom status when it's passed down from like one generation to the next, like single generation. That's more of a keepsake. That's more of it's the first step towards becoming an heirloom. When you can take something and jump it from, I'd say at least 2 generations, then you start getting into heirloom status. And that you start getting into some really deep and heavy and wonderful things when that happens. And I like to explore that from the heathen standpoint. When you start going beyond one generation and into multiples, you start talking about a lot of energies being tied up into an item. We talked before about items and naming items, bringing items into reality and giving them and recognizing the spirit within, recognizing the entity. And heirlooms are a little different. Sometimes heirlooms are named, sometimes they're not. Sometimes that is, the gun that was passed down multiple generations and was great-great-grandfather's and it's still here. There is a purpose usually behind an heirloom of some kind, but it can be something as simple as, a decoration that's meant to warm the home. It could be something as simple as a hammer that was meant for construction, for building and providing for the family. The essence of the why, what the thing was for, that's where the magic's at. That's where it really hits. And so even if it doesn't have a name necessarily, because it may just, especially if it's come down through non-heathen ancestors to you, the item may not have been given a name simply because that's not the way they do things. That doesn't mean you can't give it a name. You can if you so choose, and if you want insight into that, go back and watch my item naming video and get some insights there, and go for it. A lot of times, though, I won't necessarily name. Take it back. It depends. The best ones have names because that helps to bring them into reality. It helps to cement the legend behind them. It makes it real that this is an heirloom. This is meaningful. It gives that recognition of importance. So I recommend naming your heirlooms when you get the opportunity. But to a certain extent, it's also okay if they're not. It's just more potent and more powerful and is more likely to survive as an heirloom. I mean, if you look at things like swords being passed down through family lines and things like that, there's tons of that in the lore, largely because those are the kind of things that it's fun to write about and recognize, and then you get this named sword that is just awesome, and this is not just a named sword, it's a named sword that is a family sword. It is, it is the heirloom of this family. And so power there, strength, recognition, awesome stuff. And it doesn't always necessarily have to be swords. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of heirlooms that I carry around. One of them's kind of an heirloom. I hope to make it one theoretically, and over time, over generations. The other is an item of sentimental value that's more in the keepsake category, but I would like to, maybe turn it into something on down the line. We'll see how the generations work out. Probably not, because I don't think the item's going to hold up, but who knows. But still, I want to give you some ideas just on things that I carry around, because we're going to talk a little bit about why I carry them around, all right? Now, the first of these is a simple silver dollar. This was my grandfather's. My grandfather used to collect coins, and he was an avid coin collector, had coins from everywhere and everything, and it was incredible. I loved his coin collection. I actually have a number of his collectible coins there at the house, and they're deeply meaningful to me because they are keepsakes of him. They are reminders of him. But this is one that I picked out specifically as being important, and it's just a silver dollar. There's nothing really unusual about it other than the fact that it is just a 1976 silver dollar, but it personifies that element, of my grandfather for me. And I find that this heirloom, this what I hope to become an heirloom, this specific coin is my anchor to my grandfather, and I don't leave the house without it. I keep it in my pocket all the time, and I've almost always got it on me. I have to get, like if I'm in costume for like Ren Fair or something like that, I have to get pretty creative on how I carry it with me and keep it safe. But at any given time, when you find me, you can pretty much say, hey, let me see the coin, and I can pop it out and be like, hey, here's Granddaddy's coin. It's deeply meaningful to me. But, I mean, it can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as a specific coin that is, I mean, I'm never going to mistake this for another one. I know this one inside and out. It's deeply meaningful to me. The other thing that I carry around that's similar to that is my father's tape measure. Practical as all get out. It's just a little tape measure. It has seen better days. This is one that I would love to be able to pass down, but I seriously doubt the spring in it's going to hold out. So even if I can just keep the chassis of it together and the tape in there, but it's another one I don't leave the house without. Now, why don't I leave the house without them? Why do I keep these things on me all the time? Well, because this is one my dad carried with him all of the time. He carried it forever. And then one day, while we were sitting there having a conversation, he reached over to the shelf and pulled out a brand new one and stuck it in his pocket. And this is one he's carried since I was a child. And he set it on the table because he was going to swap out and put a new one in his pocket because, it's getting a little worn. The numbers are sometimes hard to see. The spring doesn't always like to retract the way that it's supposed to. But it was the one that I grew up with. It's the one that I knew was in his pocket all the time. You could always ask him, hey, pop out the tape measure. Boom, there it is. And so as soon as he set it on the table, I snatched it up and said, mine. Went into my pocket and has stayed there ever since. I've carried it for years, and I will continue to carry it for years. And I'm very, very careful about not losing it because it's extremely important to me. Not all heirlooms are the kind of things that you're going to carry around every day, but the reason I carry these around is because these are my anchors to these people. I'm lucky to still have my dad, and I cherish every moment that I have with him. That's why I'm out here at the shop at the family business trying to help keep this going. But this is something that I can always, even if I'm where I'm not around my dad or I'm not nearby, I can reach down, touch it, and feel that connection to him because it is laden with his energy. His energy has been, because he carried it so much, it's attuned to him, and now it is attuned to me, and it is attuned to both of us, and it carries our luck, our weird, because it has been there with us through all sorts of things. That's where we start to get into some of the power behind these heirlooms and what they can mean. The coin wasn't necessarily something that my grandfather carried around all the time, but it was something that he had for a very long time, and the coins were important to him, so it was an item of meaning to him, and it has become an item of meaning to me, and he is passed. We lost him over a decade ago, and this is a way when I need to reach down and have a moment of connection with my grandfather. I have that coin and I can do that. And I know that I walk with their luck. The familial luck is a reminder, an embodiment of that luck. And that is a thing about heirlooms. Heirlooms are an embodiment of the Orlog. They are a physical manifestation of that luck that's passed down to you. It is a totem, as it were, to the family luck. And with that comes an immense power. It is a conduit of connection to the ancestors, and is when you can physically hold something that they held, when you can physically use something that they used, then it carries an immense weight. It is just laced with this energy. And unfortunately, while the old world got this and passed down heirlooms through families, be it guns, swords, knives, axes, hammers, tools of any kind, great-grandfather's fishing rod that he used, that special lure that great-great-great-grandpappy used to catch the big bass, and always, this is the one that fed the family. And so you know that's the family feeder, and you keep that around for that reason. And even if you don't use it for that specific purpose, because it has become totemic in nature, it is still a symbol. It is still an item of power. And placing it in a position of appreciation can help to connect to that luck. Especially if you ask for, through that as a conduit, ask for great-great-great-grandpappy's blessing on your fishing going forward so that you can, feed your family. I know that sounds mundane, but that's what life is. Life is about the mundane things. Life is about feeding the family. Life is about, being able to get up and go to work. It's about being able to find happiness in the small moments around the living room or in the yard with the family. It's about finding those moments of peace for yourself. It's that, that enjoyment, that spark of life, but it's not all great big dragon slaying, going to war kind of things. The ancestors are there for us on a day-to-day basis. That's what they're there for. That's what their vested interest is in our survival and our perpetuation. So they want to impart upon you the lessons and the learning and the luck to make it through those mundane things that are the real struggle for reality. That's what we have the biggest problem with on a day-to-day basis, is just making it through the mundane things. Hardships can come out of nowhere and we rally behind the ancestors' strength and we muddle through it, but they pass. The day-to-day grind doesn't go anywhere. And that's where we need the inspiration. That's where we need the energy and the luck to keep going with the normal, the just day-to-day drudgery of things sometimes, and to be able to take a moment and find the spark, find the smile in the drudge. And that's what I pull from my ancestors for a lot of times. So a lot of these heirlooms, for this particular reason, end up on people's ancestor altars. Wonderful idea. I love it. I do it myself. I have a number of things like great-grandfather's, or I've got it's my great-uncle's razor, a great-grandfather's pin, I believe. I've got some items on my altar from several generations back. Not as many as I would like, because some of those ancestors passed, and again, while the old world got the understanding of passing down heirlooms, the modern world hasn't necessarily perpetuated that particular tradition. I think it's become conflated with materialism and sentimentality, and it's not. It's not about materialism and sentimentality. It's about totems. It's about ties to ancestral energy and these icons that create a conduit for us in that respect. Do we have to have them? No. We ourselves are an heirloom. We are the conduit to our ancestors. Everything that we need is here. But those items and those conduits, those heirlooms, can help us to make that connection to the ancestors. They can help get us in that frame of mind. They can help bring up memories and stories, those things that help us keep the ancestors alive today. That's the magic of the heirlooms. The heirlooms are like, when I reach down and grab that coin out of my pocket, I know that I'm going to have a thought about my grandfather. I know that I'm going to remember him. And every time I touch it, it brings him to mind. It primes the pump, and it keeps those neural pathways going. So I think about him on a daily basis because I take that coin out of my pocket and I put it on my little stand for it when I go to bed at night, when I dress down when I get home. And so I know every day when I put that thing in my pocket and when I set it down at night, I'm thinking about it. I know every day when I pull that tape measure out of my pocket and when I set it down, I think about my father. I know when I walk by my altar and I see the straight razor and I see the pin and I see, I think I've got a draft card from one of my ancestors. Pictures are wonderful. These things provide that conduit and they can be passed down. that it doesn't have to stop with you. You collect that altar, and then those pieces can be passed down to future generations and kept within the family. And every generation that they get passed down, it carries the weight of the connection to the original ancestor, but it also carries the connection of everyone who has handled it or has focused energy through it or has interacted with it in the time since. So that heirloom on your altar, even though you may not handle it on a daily basis, you still pour a lot of energy through it and draw energy from it. You have a connection to it, and your energy is mingling with your ancestors' energy there within the item, and it carries your signature. So if it's been passed down from great-grandmother to mother to you to your kids, that's several generations of familial energy attuned to this particular item, and it becomes an excellent conduit for connection to the ancestors. It becomes less about necessarily the connection to the specific ancestor, because after about 3 generations, it gets dodgy whether or not you've actually had any interaction with that ancestor. And so, touching great-great-great-grandfather's, hunting knife that's on the altar doesn't necessarily carry the same weight as touching grandfather's hunting knife that's on the altar, because you had direct connection with grandfather. Great-great-great-great-grandfather's hunting knife becomes a symbol for the ancestors as a whole of the family line. And that's a beautiful thing, because at that point it's not just about him, it's about him and all those that have carried it since. It's about the family that it represents. It's about the being an icon and an image, a symbol for that family unity and dedication to family and the passing of it on. So what do we do in an era where heirlooms haven't necessarily been passed down? Well, there's a couple of things we do. The first and foremost thing is we make new ones. We snatch things up. When relatives pass, snatch up something meaningful, deeply meaningful, like the things that I have, and the things that I have on the altar, which are even more deeply meaningful and irreplaceable, which is why they're on the altar, and I don't carry them around with me because I don't want anything to happen to them. I don't want to damage them in any way. They are sacred to me. And then you make them sacred to you. That's the thing. You make them sacred to you. You forge your connection to the ancestor because their energy is already in it. You forge your connection to the ancestor through this item, and you make it a sacred ritual item. You make it a thing that is dedicated to that purpose, and then you pass it on. That's how you start to forge an heirloom, a totemic heirloom. You can also take something that is yours and start to prepare it for that process. If you don't have something from a past ancestor that you can pass on, you can start preparing something yourself. And if you don't have descendants, like if you don't have kids, in that, myself probably not going to have kids, then you look to extended family and you look at where you can pass this down, and you start to pick the right recipient for it, and you kind of groom the item for transition, and then you gift it to the individual you know is going to treasure it the most and is going to turn it into that heirloom, and hopefully impart upon them the importance of why this needs to be an heirloom and how to perpetuate it themselves after that. It's like, this is how you take care of it, this is what it means, and I want you to give it either to your kids later on or to another family member that you feel is worthy of having it, that will take care of it and will treasure it as the sacred item that it is. That's how you make an heirloom. You make them yourselves. So if you don't have access to heirlooms, begin making them. If you can find, and if you've got access to like grandparents that may have items from their parents or their great-grandparents, things like that, you can get in there and discover these things while you still have a chance. Not everybody has that chance. And I've lost a lot of those chances myself. And so the ones that I do have, I hang on to fervently. And I have a number of relatives that have shuffled things to me as a result, because they know of my approach to this and know that these things are meaningful to me, and therefore, here, Eric will appreciate this, and Eric will take care of it, and it will stay in the family, and we know we're doing good there. So, let your family know that you're that person, that you are the keeper of family heirlooms and items, and then do that. Make them sacred, take care of them, and share them with family members that you know will treat them with the sacredness that they are due. Everybody's family is different, so I can't speak to recommendations on family dynamics. I won't even try to touch it. I will recognize that not everybody has positive family dynamics. Not everybody necessarily is even the right choice for keeping those heirlooms. But finding access to them may be a thing. You know, being able to go over to the great aunt's house and spending an afternoon once a year or something like that, connecting with these items may be a thing. And like I said before, it's not a must. You don't have to have these things to have a connection to your ancestors. It's just another tool in the toolbox. And the more tools we have in the toolbox, the more effective we can be at doing the job. And that's simply why I like to do a lot of these, like magical items, ritual items, things like that are not inherently necessary. You know, for ritual items, you can go out and you can honor your ancestors, and you can bring honor to their names. You can make sacrifice without having to have a whole lot of aesthetic additives, without having to have a whole lot of tools. But you can make it more efficient, better, easier by utilizing these tools. And so I like to arm you with all the tools that you can have and get you thinking about these things. So, you know, maybe you haven't thought about heirlooms and their importance from a heathen concept. But it's a whole different ballgame when you start to think of it from a heathen perspective and what that can mean. When you look at it as a physical embodiment of Orlog, this is a manifestation of Orlog being passed down through the family. It is this physical thing, and it's beautiful. I love doing it. So make of that what you will. Go forth and, you know, share stories on the Facebook group about your heirlooms and things that you enjoy. You know, go in to the comment thread on the video that I share on Facebook and just start a thread. Use it as the thread, and, you know, share some heirlooms that you're proud of. Let people see. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I want to encourage it because it is tied to the luck. It's tied to the Orlog. It's tied to the family spirit. It gives a connection to a specific spirit. It becomes a larger item over time that the power of it connects to the family line as a whole, especially as it is passed from generation to generation. Naming of said item can make it more, even more so. It becomes the legend of this item, and as legend begins to grow, it becomes an even more powerful conduit to the ancestors and allows even more of the ancestral luck to flow through it to you. Even if it's a simple little thing, it still can have immense meaning to you and immense meaning to your family. So think on heirlooms. Discuss, how do you work heirlooms into your rituals? What kind of items do you think make good heirlooms? What kind of things persist through time? I find metals are very effective because of their durability. Wooden items can be, if properly cared for. Paper items make a hard heirloom, but with the proper care and maintenance, they can be. It does take a lot more effort with something that's a little more delicate stock. So that's why a lot of items have strong metal and wood components, because they persevere. You know, it could be a vase that's been passed down from 7-8 generations ago that was important to the family. And it may have been important to the family at the time because it was expensive and was a demonstration of their wealth, a demonstration of their poshness. But that's a manifestation of their luck. You know, because their luck was strong, because their actions were good and strong and true and whole, they were able to afford this. And so it becomes a symbol of the family's luck and power. So anyway, think on it. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you all for understanding, and thank you for continuing to watch the show. Hail to you all, and may your hearth fires burn bright. Okay, I'm gonna try and get this rolling again. Man, life has been absolutely just, it's a non-offensive way to say it. It's been crazy, I'll put it that way. It's been crazy. Work schedule has been just brutal, and the summer heat hasn't helped with the energy levels at all. But it is what it is, and I continue rolling on. I think I'm clear of my chain, am I? Yeah, okay, I think I'm all right. I'm going to move it over. I don't want it clanking against the chain while I'm filming. That would be a pain. So anyway, life is rocking along. I appreciate you guys bearing with me on the schedule and everything. And I've talked about it at the beginning of the show, as I have just decided right now. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. You know how it goes. I don't have a whole lot of updates on D&D just right now. I'm doing world prep stuff. I've reached a certain point, like the beginning of my campaign, I've talked about it before, the beginning of my campaign was kind of railroady. I designed it so that they'd progress from level 1 to 5 rapidly. So that I really wanted to cut them loose on the world as level 5s, but I needed to set some story elements that I didn't want to take a year and a half setting up. That was basically the preface of the story. So I've got them seeking out these, special items, and they have met one of the first, bosses that they had to interact with relation to this item. And then the name of the world that I've released them in is Renothia, and they're seeking out the 12, which are ancient artifacts of like extraplanar power from eons and eons ago, beginning of time kind of stuff. And they've all gotten the lore dump the last time we got together, so they know all of this now, so the players that are watching this aren't getting any spoilers. But they got to meet the Ruby Dragon, which was... I use gem dragons in my stories because I like them and I like to work with them. This was before they announced the whole Fizzbands expansion, which excites me and irks me at the same time, because I really wish they had come out with Fizzbands like months ago so that I could have utilized that content in what I was doing instead of having to go through and homebrew all my own stuff. It would have allowed me some shortcuts. As is, I'm just going to use it to kind of retcon and augment some of the things that I have. I'm not going to use everything that's said in the book, but I'm going to cherry pick some things that I think will be helpful, and it'll help me as far as maybe getting some ideas for backstory and lore, because in the gist of my world in Renothia, when Tiamat and Bahamut were the first gods to enter into the world, they sang the world into existence, gave it creation. The other gods then erupted into the world, and Ilrana, who is the ruby dragon in my world, and she's this primal ancient ruby dragon. She's the daughter of Tiamat and Bahamut, who were at one time lovers and now enemies. And so she's kind of this neutral entity in the world, and she knows the story behind these items that come together and create some kind of massive megalithic weapon. Or weaponized thing. Nobody really knows because it's been lost to the annals of time. But they are scattered across, who knows? Can't say because it'll spoil things for my players. And my players have been tasked as the chosen ones to go out and find these things. And so the adventure begins. And you guys, if you followed the post talk about, my D&D stuff, you know the kind of things that I've thrown at my players. Most of these things are corrupted by the energies of what I call the 12, which is the enigmatic, chaotic items, and they're collectively known as the 12. And so the corruptive energy, the aberrant energy of these have corrupted these entities that have been close to or tied to them, and then that's what my players have run into so far. They don't know how far the stretch is, how deep it goes, etc., etc. They know the story because I did a whole huge lore dump, but I wanted to set the stage. I wanted to set the mood and the tone for everything, and then I've let them loose on the world. And now, like I said last time, gave an update on it, they spent an entire session doing like a shopping day and just dicking around town, which I found hilarious and loved every minute of it, and they enjoyed it too because they got a lot of interplay character-wise, RP-wise, and they had a lot of fun with that. Plus, they got to, use some of the spoils that they'd gotten and are incentivized to go out and get more spoils, having seen some of the other things that are available to them in the store. So as a DM, I highly recommend you utilize magic shops as an incentive for your players if you want them to go out and like do bounties or to do dungeon delves, things like that. Also, use it as a money sink so that when they do amass millions and millions and millions of gold, you've got something for them to pour it into. You choose what's in it, so you can limit it or not, and it gives you a chance to showcase some magic items that maybe wouldn't necessarily be like found in a dungeon kind of thing. Like my brother came up with this idea the other day. He was talking about, hey, what if we went to the artificer down in the the Gadget Town, and Tinker Town is what I call it. What if we went down to Tinker Town and we picked up a couple of casters, so that while we're in the dungeon, if we have a bunch of stuff we want to carry, we can just rip a door off its hinge, throw some casters on it, load up the door as a buggy, and then wheel it out. I'm like, that's brilliant. I absolutely love this. You get a point of inspiration for the next session. Mark that down. And then I said, I'm going to take that and run with it, if that's okay. And so I created a new magic item for the campaign, which DMs do this stuff all the time. We love making magic items and creatures and stuff like that. It's just fun. You guys, if you're DMs, most of my players know they like to come up with really cool kind of stuff like that. So anyway, I named it after one of his characters from a previous game. We played a Mage Dark Ages. Sorry, too many systems running through my head. Mage Dark Ages, and his character Sylvain in there was just this crazy kind of guy who was coming up with all kinds of weird and inventive ways to use magic to buck the system. So I created Sylvain's Simple Solution. And Sylvain's Simple Solution is a little 6-inch wheel that you could clip to your belt or something like that. And then it's got 2 buttons on it. If you press the first button, the wheel expands out to a good 3-foot wagon wheel. And it splits in 2, and then it extends with about a 5-foot axle in between. And so that's groovy. You now have an instant wheel and axle. And then it shrinks down again and is the size of like a 6-inch wheel that you can hang off your belt. It's not something that you can just stick in a pocket, but it is something that's not terribly encumbering when it comes to traveling around. If you've got a bag of holding, this small item is not going to take up terribly much space. I've designed it so that in its compact form it doesn't weigh a whole lot. And you could stack multiple in a bag of holding and carry them with you into the dungeon. The idea here is if you press the second button while it's expanded out into its axled form, whatever you lay on top of the axle becomes magically affixed to the axle. And then pressing that button again will release it. The whole idea here is you could pull out 2 of these Sylvain Simple Solutions, expand them out, lay a door across it, press the button on each of them, and then instantly you have a cart. If you don't want a whole cart-size thing, then you need only 1 axle. You can create yourself a little rickshaw-style 2-wheel cart, and you can just load that sucker up, and then you're only limited by your strength and pulling capacity. So you can just get at it. I mean, I could ultimately say, well, that's too much weight for the door splinters under it. It depends on how nitpicky I want to be in-game, and some of that I'm going to play test to figure it out. If you're on D&D Beyond, you can actually look up Sylvain's Simple Solution in the homebrew items and incorporate it into your campaign if you would like to. It's there, it's ready-made. All you have to do is go in, add it to your collection, and then you can, add it to your character's inventories. And that way you don't have to worry about going through and trying to actually create it within D&D Beyond, which is not difficult. But there it is, if you guys want it, and that's Sylvain, Sylvain. Sylvain's Simple Solution. So feel free, it doesn't cost anything. You go out there and you just add it to your collection, and you're welcome to use it in your campaigns. So if you dig it, use it, check it out. Tell me some of the wild and crazy stories that you guys come up with when using it, because it's not limited to doors. You can stick all kinds of things to it, and it can get pretty zany pretty quickly, especially when you start, using it as a fulcrum and things like that. It's on the level of a movable rod, because there's some zany, crazy stuff you can do with the immovable rod. The immovable rod is OP in a lot of ways for the rarity of the item. And I made these common magical items because they don't do a whole lot. They do kind of one thing and they do it well. Their uses are limited to the player's imagination. And so this is something that if your players are kind of focused on other stuff and running through, it's not game breaking in any way. It's just utilitarian. If you have some particularly zany and creative players, it can get game breaking. Who knows? Who knows? It's fun. It's neat. I like to play with it. You guys play test it. Let me know what you guys think about it and all that fun stuff. Anyway, that's enough rambling about D&D. I will have more stuff for you here in the future. I'm letting them loose on the world in the open world kind of sense, so we'll see where it goes from there. Hopefully, I will have some really cool stories to tell coming up. And if you guys are interested in the lore for my game and my world setting and things like that, let me know in the Facebook group, and I may create kind of a spin-off thing, maybe a spin-off community page. I don't want to inundate the Heathen page with all the D&D stuff, but I could create a D&D community page for Renothia and share out some of my source materials and things like that as things go along. I'm going to be picky about what I let out, though, because I don't want to spoil things for my players. But, it's a thing. If you guys want to create kind of a Heathen D&D community group, I may do something like that. So anyway, on to today's episode. We're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam.